Hello everyone, it's your host, SethTheProgrammer, and today we're going to be going over Itachi Uchiha. Now, I've had a pretty long chain of Naruto videos over the years, and arguments always evolve, Itachi being especially not immune to this. In fact, I would go on to say that Itachi is actually surprisingly underrated, if anything. Now, obviously, every obsequious fandom has its over-exaggerated expectations of a character. Some people think Itachi would solve all Shippuden by himself and would destroy most other fictional universes single-handedly and is the solo god of Naruto, mainly simply because of Edge. But this is obviously going over him more realistically and will describe many of his character traits that have held him back over the series while describing the limits of what his abilities can really be argued as. I also think that there's many things that should be said here for the community to etch into their hearts and minds and show around when the time comes, so I think this will be overall an important piece to the scaling archive I have, very similar to my Hiruzen and Minato videos respectively. This video will also go over extra material such as Itachi Daylight, Itachi Midnight, and the Akatsuki novel respectively, which I feel many people overlook when scaling him that might be refreshing or interesting to hear about. Now, as always, if this is maybe your second time coming here, it's not your first rodeo, maybe you should consider subscribing, or if you like the video, learn something new, maybe consider liking the video as well. I'd really appreciate it, and let's get started. From the get-go, I think it's important to establish Itachi as a character before going over him as a fighter. He's shown great potential from a very young age. We're talking about the kid with immense talent and the mindset of a Hokage at 7 years old, after all. So there's more depth to Itachi than just raw power. This conversation is important because his character more often than not hinders his ability in combat, and many fans are surprisingly blind to this. Examples being some actually believe Sasuke in his fight with Itachi was really winning or seriously countering Itachi's full power, and had absolutely no clue that it was just Itachi basically ending himself to make amends for his failures and save Sasuke from Orochimaru. In a similar sense as Minato's golden boy missteps I outlined in the 4th Hokage Is Underrated video, failure and conflict play a huge role in the development and portrayal of Itachi's character throughout the story of Naruto. Since he was no more than 4 years old, as described in Itachi's story Daylight, he was greeted with massive mountains of bodies and his father's borderline nihilistic view of shinobi, which almost made him awaken his sharingan in anger at such a young age. He was a boy whose face was carved by lines of which Danzo describes as the bearer of chaos and bad luck. Since this, he has wanted to become the Hokage and the strongest shinobi, so that all others would be forced to obey him and stop fighting amongst each other. We even see this sentiment somewhat echoed by Sasuke in the final battle with Naruto. This would be the reason he would be so set on stopping the Uchiha from fighting the Leaf and ended up pushing Itachi to becoming the greatest talent the Academy had ever seen at the time, even compared to his predecessors like the 4th Hokage. It also caused him to overstudy and research into everything from Kekkei Genkai, Tailed Beast, and even things like sage techniques or the fundamentals of nature energy, which is probably why he was able to instantly recognize Kabuto's Sage Mode and the Ryuchi Cave. This study would then help to prepare him for his encounter with masked Obito as well, with Obito eventually destroying his team too and killing one of Itachi's teammates. Obito casts a massive genjutsu that shakes the very air around them, with Itachi avoiding this where others, including Jonin and Daimyo's guard, couldn't. But it's not enough to save everyone around him. This encounter would reinforce Itachi's philosophy that he needed to be the strongest, and he would look to surpass this masked man specifically. So from here you have a very conflicted child who is both a pacifist and someone who thinks pacifism can only be achieved through absolute power and force of will, and thus desires to better himself constantly. And while Itachi may be a rather serious pacifist and power-hungry, he's an even more serious utilitarian and realist. Danzo, a rather underrated character as well, mind you, can read most top shinobi like a book, and Itachi, a shinobi Danzo says you see maybe once every 100 years, is no exception. Danzo poses a hypothetical to him and asks, if there was a ship at sea, including crew, and one person among that crew was deathly sick, with this one crewman threatening to contaminate all the others with his illness, would it be acceptable to kill him? And Itachi's cold response is to simply say that the man would die anyway and he'd do what he had to do. This is perfect because it outlines that while Itachi has massive disdain for fighting and harming others, he will still hurt and harm others if his aversion of not doing so supersedes his value of doing so. This explains why he spared so many characters who he could have easily massacred, including Kakashi and Asuma, who have actually questioned Itachi's reasoning for doing so since his very first appearance in the manga. Itachi being a part of the Akatsuki is another curious matter as well. It might seem like somewhat of a contradiction for him to be in it, however it's stated he only is trying to get on their good side, so they'll divulge more secret and classified information to him, which they only give to those they trust. It's also stated in the manga numerous times that Itachi did it to protect Konoha from Obito and Sasuke from Danzo. Of course, Itachi does have a dark side that was brought up by Danzo in the death of Shisui, such as when he was actually planning to kill his father and all the ringleaders of the Uchiha coup in the middle of the street, had Sasuke not intervened in the novel, something that's not so apparent in the anime and manga since you can't really read Itachi's thoughts. Although this is still almost always superseded by his pacifism and his duty to his beliefs, and even then he did this for a very justified reason and not just raw anger. All the fights you can really mention with him in it are not displays of his true strength, the exception being battles against characters he doesn't need to hold back in, like versus Edo Nagato, Hydra, Orochimaru, and Sage Kabuto. But even in that fight against Kabuto, Itachi was not allowed to go all out due to not being allowed to kill him, or else the Edo Tensei would have continued, and we all saw what happened to Orochimaru and Nagato. So, what is Itachi's true strength? Once again, Itachi is a child prodigy. At 9 years old, he's cleared the Forest of Death in Itachi Daylight, a 3-man assignment normally. However, he did this solo and in the fastest time ever seen in the verse, except for later on when Gaara surpasses it in part 1. Even faster than Kakashi and Minato's records respectively, and by 12 years old in Itachi Midnight, not only was he considered the top of the Uchiha by Danzo and Hiruzen, he was considered a valid opponent by a 20-plus-year-old Obito Uchiha. The same Obito who at 14 had one of the most hacked Mangekyo of all time, a Zetsu-amped body, and could scare Minato into sacrificing himself to try and stop him in the future. The same Obito that could take a Rasengan straight to the body from the 4th Hokage, a Hokage who could threaten a man rivaling a perfect Jinchuriki 8-Tails with just a kunai, and considering 12-year-old Itachi a valid opponent, and thus listen to him and not coming to the leaf as well. This scaling is very consistent considering later on, Obito was sure that if an older Itachi knew more of his secrets, he would already have been killed, so Itachi being a rival at such a young age is actually very consistent. Many people get confused by this because it's stated by Kakashi that Itachi became an Anbu general at 13, although this is more than likely due to Hiruzen and Danzo boosting his age so that people wouldn't question him joining rather than a contradiction which they debated about. With Kakashi not knowing much about him really to begin with, if you do want to say he was 13 instead of 12 here, nothing really changes though. Not much time later, Orochimaru is teamed up with Itachi in the Akatsuki. Orochimaru of course tries to steal his young Uchiha body, and is suddenly impaled from all sides and stuck in place while Itachi slashes his arm off in the real world. Many people get this confused with Tsukuyomi, but this is actually just Itachi's normal Sharingan Genjutsu, the Demon Illusion Shackle Stakes. This would then scare Orochimaru so bad that he would never come for Itachi again until he thought he was near death against Sasuke, and blatantly claimed that Itachi was stronger than him even during part 1 and after his Akatsuki days. This is important because Orochimaru is the same character who could scrap with the 3rd Hokage Hiruzen and could summon 2 of the Hokage. Hiruzen being stated as the strongest Kage even as an old man, and many people who have seen my Hiruzen video will know that Hiruzen held back against Orochimaru for most of the fight. However, what if I told you that Orochimaru probably held back as well? Huh? Many people aren't aware of this, and I was considering making an Orochimaru video for this very reason, but it's implied in many mediums that Orochimaru still has feelings for the Sannin and his teacher. The bond didn't waver, per se. This is shown in the way he fights Hiruzen as well as stated in the Naruto databooks. He starts the encounter by stabbing himself in the hand to get over his emotions towards his old teacher, and stop himself from crying, and then summons Edo Tensei to do all his dirty work while he just watches. He almost never participates in the fight himself and seems almost reluctant. It's a conflict between his future versus his past, and in the fight he also never unleashes his strongest Hydra Jutsu and doesn't even make his own summonings or anything. So while he may have been going for the kill, it wasn't all a one-sided holdback session per se. This would also be consistent considering Orochimaru could put a much younger Hiruzen and Enma on the ground back in the day when he was escaping the leaf. An Enma went older who could shove the Nine-Tails out of the village. Now, who you think would win if they both went all out isn't really important. All that matters is both never went all out, but Orochimaru claims Itachi is superior to him and won't even bother clashing with him after getting annihilated so easily. Itachi would then play villain and allow Sasuke to kill him in their final battle, and even when deathly sick and basically blind, he destroys Orochimaru one last time with 0 difficulty and bids farewell. Time would pass, and eventually Sasuke would implant Itachi's eyes into himself, awakening the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, with Kabuto reanimating many high-powered shinobi for Obito's 4th Great Ninja War, including Itachi himself. As an Edo, Itachi's real first fight comes up against Kyuubi, Chakra enhanced Naruto, and Killer Bee. In this fight, Naruto is pushing himself to his absolute limits, with Killer Bee trying to play as a support role, but even with just his normal Sharingan, Itachi is far too much for them to really handle, with him being able to easily parry away all of KCM Naruto's taijutsu and even dodge Killer Bee attacking his blind spots at the same time, which people really overlook. And this is one of the things that makes Itachi so powerful in combat, his insane speed and hacks techniques, which is something you'll notice throughout this video. Eventually, Itachi is hit by his own Kodoa Matsukami he set up in advance with Nin Naruto and turns on Edo Nagato, burning him and his summonings away with Amaterasu so fast that Nagato can't even react, despite his body being on auto counter mode due to the Edo Tensei, as described by the 3rd Raikage and the 2nd Mizukage. Nagato tries to regain his footing after he regenerates from Amaterasu and Kabuto's help, and tries to capture Killer Bee and Naruto with Chibaku Tensei. Despite Itachi not even using his full Susanoo, the group blow it away with Itachi ending things by blitzing Nagato with his Totsuka blade. You could argue that this is because Nagato wasn't mobile enough, however Nagato didn't even attempt to counter it with Shinra Tensei or anything and was surprised. Regardless, Nagato is out of the game. Itachi gives Naruto a word of advice on how trying to handle everything yourself will result in failure, referring to how he himself desired absolute power to control all others and force them to stop fighting. Basically saying Itachi and Naruto had similar mindsets at a time. Itachi then goes off to release the Edo Tensei while Naruto deals with Madara, and Sasuke with the EMS shows up as well and tries to restrain Itachi with Susanoo, and Itachi simply smacks his Susanoo away and tells him of his mistakes. In the end, however, both are forced to face Kabuto, a supposed rival to Kakashi in Part 1, who has now mastered Sage Mode and taken Orochimaru's Chakra without being able to kill him. This fight is very interesting because it hammers in that speed scaling I was hitting at earlier. Kabuto dodges many of Sasuke's attacks, and Itachi is often having to defend Sasuke. He also somewhat resists things Sasuke can't, such as the Sage Art White Rage technique. In the end, he puts Kabuto in an infinite loop known as the Izanami and bids farewell after releasing the Edo Tensei. This scuffle is insanely important because Sasuke gets no amps from here until the war, yet EMS Sasuke is able to fight alongside mastered KCM Naruto. When Naruto first obtained Kyuubi Chakra mode, he's able to blitz by the 4th Raikage at full speed, when some calcing it anywhere from the feat requiring several to 72 times greater than the Raikage's speed. But that's just the base Kyuubi Chakra mode, not the mastered variant one he employs later. The mastered variant is impressive because it surpasses even the full KCM2 mode with his cloak when he first uses it against Obito in the Tailed Beast. This is due to the fact that Obito is actually able to restrain a KCM2 clone and avoid many of its attacks, with Madara outright just manhandling him with a wood style. Whereas later, after Neji's death and far more mastery of Kurama's Chakra, Naruto is deflecting and dodging attacks from his blind spots from Rinnegan Obito and Edo Madara at the same time, while also protecting the entire Shinobi Alliance by himself. And then EMS Sasuke just comes in and is a rival to this Naruto and blatantly competes with his Rasen Shuriken with just his Amaterasu and can fight side by side him. At one point, EMS Sasuke even threatens to incinerate the entire Ten Tails into ash, and Naruto yells at him to stop. So the fact that Itachi scales to this is extremely telling. Now, as I said before, Itachi is a speed-based character with many hacks and one-shot techniques, so even if you were to say that Itachi is only rivaling Sasuke in speed, even though he is able to deflect his Susanoo, and his Amaterasu is considered necessary next to Sasuke's versus Kabuto, it doesn't really change Itachi's plan in battle. The most famous of Itachi's hacks is of course his Genjutsu. Now, I already went over his normal Genjutsu, such as how he no-diffed Orochimaru with his demonic illusion, proving he doesn't even need stronger Genjutsu for high Kage level opponents. However, most people are actually curious about Itachi's Tsukuyomi, one of his stronger hacks. The Tsukuyomi is a very interesting ability that most people surprisingly underestimate and don't really understand all that well. The data book describes it, and it's insane. So, amidst the insight and hypnosis possessed by Sharingan is a supreme Genjutsu, born from the aforementioned hypnosis, Tsukuyomi. Originally, people on the face of the earth lived bound by limitations like time, gravity, and space, and how people exert their abilities within those restrictions is what separates the victors from the vanquished. But in the mental world where the caster drags their opponent, the Tsukuyomi Jutsu gives them control over those very limitations. Namely, this means inside the Genjutsu, the physical world's common sense is completely irrelevant and opposing the caster is impossible. Someone caught into the Tsukuyomi find themselves in a strange world of infinity, their fate lying inside the caster's hands. Sometime they will undergo the torments of hell, and some other time they'll be repeatedly shown a horrendous, hellish picture of agony and mayhem, with no idea of when either of those will end. As a result, the poor prisoner can only wait until the collapses of their psyches. Even a body made of iron or the speed of light are powerless before this jutsu, which is why it is feared as the most powerful. In essence, he's trapping his opponents in an infinite illusionary universe where he is in control. The jutsu cannot be stopped even by perfect Jinchuriki like conventional genjutsu. Naruto warns B of this, as only the victim knows the genjutsu is happening and the seemingly endless cycle in the illusion is only in an instant in the real world. During this genjutsu, Itachi can make you live out your entire life. In Itachi Midnight, Itachi casts Tsukuyomi on many Uchiha, including Izumi Uchiha. And in the illusion, he makes the time that moved within the genjutsu 1/100th of 1/1000th of 1/1,000,000th of that in the real world, causing her to live out her entire life in the illusionary universe and die of old age in an instant. And when she wakes up, her mind snaps and she dies. This is described as the mind and body were indivisible. If the mind decays, the body follows. Meaning, if Itachi mind breaks you, you die. Itachi would then go off to kill Yashiro Uchiha in a way more brutal way with Tsukuyomi by stabbing him with infinite clones and causing his mind to break and die to pain and anguish rather than time. His next most popular hacks and set of abilities are that of his Armored Susanoo. His Armored Susanoo is unique because it is not simply a shield to cover his body, but one that has obtained particularly legendary and powerful weapons to enhance his abilities beyond their norm, these being the TOTSUKA blade and the Yada mirror, which are described as the 10-handed blade that can cut down any foe in his right hand and the shield that can deflect all attacks in his left. The TOTSUKA blade is a variant of the Kusanagi blade Orochimaru used to fight off in her Enma in his adamantine staff state, and on contact with its non-physical and formless blade, it plunges whoever it touches into a genjutsu while simultaneously sealing them for eternity in a gourd, with the Yada mirror altering all its properties to match whatever attacks strike it, canceling them out. Next is his Amaterasu. Now, the Amaterasu is definitely one of those things that gets insanely powerful. It tends to be underestimated due to his inability to really affect the Six Paths Rinnegan-esque cast later in the series, you know, all the aliens from outer space that just neg ninjutsu and can absorb it. But for beings that are normal, that can't simply absorb or negate ninjutsu, it is insanely powerful. In the hands of EMS Sasuke, Amaterasu is going to burn the Ten Tails into ash and make Naruto worried, with it being able to burn through the fire-breathing toad of Jiraiya, Nagato in his summonings, and even the perfect Jinchuriki Eight Tails. In the data book, it's described as having temperature like the sun. However, this is actually downplay. Energy transferred through heat is not as impressive as you think it is. The core of the sun itself only emits energy comparable to around 1,000 tons of TNT per second. And for those that don't know, say destroying the Earth is like 10 to the 32 joules of energy, right? And this is nothing in comparison. However, 1,000 tons of TNT would still tear apart several city blocks, but is far behind even characters like Datara and the weaker Tail Beast. This is because an object won't reach a temperature beyond the source of the heat itself. However, even if we remove this restriction allowing the object to continue climbing on in temperature, we still only see calculations in the 1 million megaton per second range. This sounds like a lot again. Really, it doesn't compare to the things we see from characters like the 9 and 10 Tails perform on a regular basis. So if anything, this is a downplayed statement, and it's sort of similar to saying like a Chidori that can break through rock, right? It's like, okay, we get that. You know, another thing to consider is like, okay, just because you're as hot as something doesn't mean you can blow it up, right? Even if you're as hot as the sun, it doesn't make you star level. With all these hacks, later war arc speed scaling, and a massive intelligence that even scares Obito, it's no wonder Kabuto thought he could have possibly prevented the war with the secrets he had. Of course, this is not him saying he could solo the war, but still, Itachi's power is absolutely insane for what would seem like almost no reason at first. In Obito's case, he awakened the Mangekyo, sure, but he also had like a Zetsu body that took him beyond just normal persons, and he also had Madara's training and learned insane things from Zetsus and so on. Madara is a reincarnation of Indra, had EMS, and had many more cataclysmic battles and pitched fights against Hashirama alongside the Nine Tails and so on, so he kind of makes sense. So why was Itachi so strong? And the answer is actually quite similar to Madara, but it makes more sense. As I described earlier, ever since Itachi was younger, he trained both his body and mind to its peak, even in times of peace. Although the truth is that his hatred is what amped his Sharingan to this pinnacle we see throughout the series. This is described by both Tobirama and in the Sakura light novel. The Sharingan taps into the power of their heart, but also into their hatred, and amplifies the ocular powers of an Uchiha depending on it. After reluctantly slaughtering the entire Uchiha with tears in his eyes, Itachi would get a massive amp. Massive conviction and will increases its powers as well. Itachi would then have to live with this for almost a decade straight, holding his tongue and biding his time. Perhaps this massive surge of power is similar to how Darth Vader was described in the expanded universe versus Darth Maul, whereas Darkseid was actually amped by the power of hating himself. In a similar sense, Itachi's power, the man who wanted his brother to kill him so that he can make amends for his failure, comes from his outstanding conviction and his self-hatred. Anyways, guys, that is the video. I hope you all enjoyed. I think this will be a pretty solid addition to any Itachi scaling you have out there, and if you did think so, please leave a like. As I said before, I really do appreciate it. Now, of course, there's some other things to talk about, like, didn't Hashirama say that Itachi was a better shinobi? And it's like, okay, first of all, he doesn't know how strong Itachi is. He's just talking about his personality and integrity as a shinobi, not his strength or anything. But other than that, guys, really do hope you enjoyed, and till next time.